When I tell you it's colder than it ought to be out here, I don't know if this is focused. Um, I want to just come talk about some things that have been concerning me recently. And I find myself thinking about this or having conversation about this, so I thought it might be worth documenting. I made a video like this a few months ago where I was talking about psychological warfare, and I feel like in the last few months, the things I was discussing then have developed, and I'm concerned. I'm concerned about a few things. Number one is this virus. I'm not so concerned about the virus itself right now. I'm more concerned about how this virus is causing people to think and treat each other, and how the government or these organizations, World Health Organizations, whatever you would classify them as, how they are using it to push forward certain things. The reason I'm concerned about how this virus is causing people to think is because I look at a situation like what's happening with the masks, where it's something really simple, something relatively harmless. Wear a mask, why not? You know? But when I think just like a little bit more into it, and I think about the mindset that's being implemented into our psyches, when I think about how someone who chooses not to wear a mask is now treated, on an economic level, they're ostracized. If you don't have a mask, you can't go into stores, you can't go into public spaces, you can't board a plane, you can't do anything or go anywhere on an economic level if you don't ascribe to this thing that the government has mandated. So economically, you're ostracized from society and from living, from existing, from doing the things that you need to do to keep going. Socially, you're condemned. If you don't wear a mask, you're seen as socially irresponsible, inconsiderate, or evil. And people look at you as if you are the worst kind of person. A lot of times, you know? People look down on you if you choose not to wear this mask for whatever reason. And when I think about how this mindset and this ostracization, if that's the word, how a government mandate for masks can create this kind of power on their end. What then when they choose to introduce something even more powerful, or something that actually affects an individual's livelihood, say the vaccine? What then when they give the same treatment that they gave to the masks to the vaccine, and say if you don't take this vaccine, you will be economically ostracized. You will not be able to go in public spaces. You will not be able to go to stores. You will not be able to go out. You will not be able to fly on planes. You will not be able to go to school. You will not be able to do anything unless you get this vaccine. And then socially, you will be ostracized. Society will be conditioned to view people without the vaccination, as they view people without the masks, as people who are rebellious, counterproductive, inconsiderate, stupid, whatever else. And when I think about how this is already in our mindsets in a mask, I look and I see that we are already in the perfect position for the government or the World Health Organization or whoever to implement this kind of power, because they already have it. We're already existing as that. Then we think about these checks that have been coming out. We are already being put in a position where we are completely dependent and needing the government for survival. And it's not to say, like, nothing against people who got these checks. I got one of these checks. I'm just saying, think about like the mindset behind it though. We're dependent on these people. And so it gets to a point where it starts It starts out with these small things, but what happens in a few months or a few years when they start bringing out the big things that they had already prepped your mind for? They had already conditioned you to exist in a certain reality. So when they roll out these big things, it's a seamless transition. You don't even realize you're already too far out. It's kind of like swimming, when you're in the water and you don't realize the tide is taking you out. So your intention is just to be in the shallow end. But before you know it, if you don't pay attention, you're far deeper than you anticipated to be, and even more, you're too far to turn back. I feel that we're on that course already. I feel that we're on that course where all these things are happening and nobody's thinking about it. Nobody's really thinking about the kind of mindset that these kinds of things that are being implemented is implementing into us. Even in this isolation, we are disconnected from reality. And now everything is online. Your school is online. Your banking is online. Your media, your news, everything is online. And because you aren't interacting with the real world as much anymore, your perception of what reality is based on what you are being shown isolated in your home. So you don't even know what's really going on in the world. It's not like maybe a few years ago when you could get on Twitter and see something trending, but then you could go outside and see, oh, well, it's not actually that relevant in real life. It's just relevant on Twitter. There is hardly a distinction anymore. What is relevant online is what we believe is relevant in real life, or what we make relevant in real life. And so we're now living and existing in a virtual world, and some of us, like people my age or older, at least have some sense or some point of reference to say, hey, there is a world outside of this virtual world. But I think about my siblings. I have an 8-year-old sister and a younger brother. This is their only reality. They don't have a point of reference of life before the internet. They don't have a point of reference of life before this. This is the real world. So even though we who are older might be able to look at it and make a distinction, those who are younger are born into this. So they won't even have a point of reference to grow up and discern between reality and the false reality that's being created around them. Their only reality will be the false virtual reality. That will be real life for them. That is real life for them. And so I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the trajectory of people's way of thinking, or lack of thinking, for that matter. I'm concerned that we aren't having these discussions. I'm concerned that to talk about these things might come off as, or easily comes off as, I don't know, whatever people want to call it. But we're not talking about these things. We're just existing in them. We're just waiting for the next vaccine because we've been prepared to feel like that's going to be our saving grace. We're just waiting for the next stimulus check because we've been convinced to believe that the government providing for us is a good thing. What happens then when the very hand that's feeding you starts to feed you something that's killing you? Then you can't deny it. There's something else. I remember in the last video I made on psychological warfare, I talked about how this warfare is happening on 3 different levels from what I can identify. It's happening on a physical level in regard to what we can see in real life. At the time, there were a lot of protests going on. So we could see in real life the protests, the tension. We can see what happens when black people go out to protest for justice, and how the government or the police or how authority responds. And then we can see how that same authority responds to white people when they storm the Capitol building. We can see that on a physical level. And I think many of us stay there. Maybe many of us are called to function in that space. but then it also happens on a psychological level. The way in which we are being conditioned to think. And I'm seeing more of that more recently. How the warfare is being waged not only on us physically for the color of our skin, but on us mentally, in conditioning the way we think and putting us in positions where we have no choice or no option to think for ourselves. We can only think within the margin that someone else has created, because we're not connected to real life anymore. And even more, it's so many different reasons, so many different ways that the psychological warfare is happening, particularly to people of color. So there's the two tiers. And then I had said that the warfare is also happening on a spiritual level, and at the time, I didn't feel that I was equipped with enough knowledge or information to really expand on it. Now I feel like I might have just a little bit more perspective. I won't say I have it all figured out, but I feel like I have a little bit more of a perspective worth sharing. The warfare, the third tier that I could argue as being the most important or at the top for me, is spiritual. Because these people, whoever they may be, whoever you want to call them, these people either want to be God or want to keep you from God, or both at the same time. You particularly, people of color, wanting to keep you from God, and this has been something that's been going on probably since Christ died or before, wanting to keep you from God because in God is your identity. And even more, in God, you will find your identity and your perception of what reality really is. Because we've already been living in a trance. This isn't new. Everything I'm talking about, this isn't new. It's just coming forward now because of what the times are. And the times, from my understanding, are the fulfillment of our 400-year captivity, after which Yah's people are being called back to the knowledge of who they are, rather, the knowledge of who He is, and the knowledge of who they are in Him, to prepare for the end. And that, I think, is one of the biggest things that is causing all of the hysteria that we're seeing, not only outside in the world, but internally within ourselves. Many people, myself included, can attest to the fact of going through deeply spiritual, emotional, esoteric changes over the past year. And I've seen this on a collective level and an individual level. And not many people have been able to understand why. And so we've been seeing this rise in spirituality. We've been seeing this rise in theories and conspiracies about the world and powers and God. I was talking to my friend the other day, and he was telling me about how, was it the FBI or the CIA or whoever holds that information, was releasing information that essentially gave validity to aliens and spaceships. It's not no aliens and spaceships out here, bro. That's a distraction. Because they know what is happening inside of you is calling you to something beyond yourself. So what they're going to try to do is create that idea of what is beyond yourself and say that is what you need to be looking towards. You need to be looking out for aliens because you're feeling something deeply spiritual inside of you that you know is something bigger than yourself is calling you. It's the aliens. It's the universe. It's your ancestors. It's the gods. No, it's Yah. It's Yahweh calling His children back after the 400-year captivity has ended in 2019, 400 years after 1619, when the first slave touched down in Virginia, on this soil. It's Yah reclaiming and calling His children back as He promised, and calling them from the east and from the west and from the north and from the south. And they know what time it is. Even more, those beings or things that exist in the spiritual beyond what we can understand on this physical level also know what time it is. The enemy, the adversary, Hasatan, is getting very loud. He's getting very loud because he knows what time it is. The world is turning upside down, and it's centered on the identity of black people. Not for our own sake or our own glory, because the only reason it's centered on us is because the Most High has chosen us and He has not let us go. And so a lot of these systems are falling apart. A lot of things are going to be falling down. A lot of changes are going to be happening internally and in the world. And now more than ever is when I think that we need to be returning to the Most High Yah. Because the only reason we got here in the beginning, the only reason we were brought here as slaves is because we disobeyed the laws and the commandments and the Torah, the instructions, the teachings of the Most High. And we didn't just disobey some laws. We have to understand that the laws that He gave us were for us, for our own good. It was to promote healthy living. So when we disobeyed laws, we were letting injustice run rampant. We were letting evil run rampant. Jealousy, envy, all of these things that we naturally despise ran rampant when we walked away from the instructions of the Most High. Idolatry, the worshiping of stones and stars and suns and moons and people and images was running rampant. And we walked away from the Most High Yah, not realizing that we would be walking away from ourselves as well. And so there's a lot of awakenings that's happening. But I want to make it clear that we are not woke. We will not reach the end until we know the Most High Yah. The enemy, my father tells me this, the enemy will make you comfortable where you are to keep you from getting to where you need to be. He will make you comfortable where you are to keep you from getting to where you need to be. And that's for me as well. We cannot get comfortable now. We cannot get comfortable now. Now we're being called back. Israel is being called back. The one true living God is calling His people. He's not calling a church. He's not calling a religious institution. He's calling His people. True Israel. True Jews. And so as easy as it might be to point fingers at all these different things, at all these different people, at all these different ideas, we can point fingers and we can stand against them, yes. But understand that now more than ever, the most important thing for us to really make it through the times that are ahead, because they're going to get harder. I believe they're going to get harder. Especially for the people who are standing by Yah. It might look a lot easier for the people who will submit themselves to the world, or who won't think about this in depth enough to see the need to pull away and come out of all of what's about to happen. It might look very easy on TV for them. But for the people who are standing by the Most High God, it's going to get very difficult. But He's also going to be your strength and be your rock and be your foundation. And so everything that's sent against you to kill you, He will turn around and work it for you. And you will see Him fight on your behalf. It's not your fight. Your best weapon is submission. Your best weapon right now is submission, to function in the way that the Most High will have you in this period of time. So, just wanted to say that out loud. If I share this, I love you. I love you all, wherever you are on your journey, wherever you are in your space. you know, I just pray that you continue to find truth, wisdom, in whatever space the Most High has you. I pray that He draws you nearer to Him to understand how to navigate through these muddy waters that we're already getting into. Y'all be praised as always. And, yeah, much love.